So this lecture will be on chapter 1. And just to warn you, and I'll probably do this each time I record my lecture, I may run into technical difficulties. I may need to leave. And if that's the case, I will break up the lecture on chapter 1. So you might see chapter 1 lecture, part 1, 2, or 3. I've had technical difficulties before. And or I may just need to take a pause, and so you may see the link chapter 1, lecture 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So I might break it up into 20 minutes or 30 minutes, um, or it may be the full lecture itself. First of all, I want to welcome you to International Business. It used to be that international business was rather straightforward. Well, that's, with some complications, of course. Anything human beings get involved, it gets more complex than what it's really intended. But with what's happening globally right now, certainly international business is no longer just about business, but there are a lot of different pressure points that impact international commerce, and we can't ignore those because it impacts the business of international business. Okay, so and we are in the middle of coronavirus. Although hopefully by end of this year it will dissipate and things will go back to normal. But certainly coronavirus has had tremendous impact in international businesses like tourism. Your ability to travel, especially with the warmer weather coming on, people want to travel. Colder weather, people want to travel to warm weather, and so on and so forth. So getting back to chapter 1, I will highlight some of it, but it is important for you to read the chapter 1, before listening to it. So if you have not read it, I recommend that you read the chapter first and print out the PowerPoint slides, which is under resource link. Okay. And then follow the lecture. Again, I'm not going to be lecturing all aspects of it. I'll highlight some of the important aspects of this chapter. So if you look at the title of chapter 1, Globalization and International Business, this is what we're going to talk about. And as with any chapters or any course, we will talk about this by first defining what we mean by globalization and international business. Okay, so the textbook defines, and I think it's a very good definition, globalization as broadening set of interdependent relationship among people from different parts of the world that happen to be divided into nations. Okay, I want to highlight a couple of words in this definition, and that's interdependent relationship. Globalization, as broadly as defined, is to the extent that we are interdependent with one another, with people, with countries, among countries, with each other. The more interdependent we are, the more globalized we are. It could be basic food items. When you go to Freshco, Zehrs, and you look up, especially during the cold weather, during the winter month, where our Canadian farmers cannot produce some of these fruits and vegetables, it gets imported from Mexico, Chile, and so on. And when the warmer weather arrives to our region, we export wine, tomatoes, cucumbers, and etc. You'd be surprised. I was traveling through state of New York before the coronavirus, and I was happy to see vegetables, cucumbers, tomatoes from Leamington in New York. This was specific in northern New York State, like Syracuse, where so the more we become interdependent, and more we have more interdependent relationship among people, among nation, the more globalized we would say it is. And then it says people from different parts of the world divided into nation. Nation, the definition of nation is quite tricky. Okay, but we use the definition of nation like Canada, United States, Mexico, and so forth, because it's a most convenient way. Our boundaries have been set, our political system and culture has been set. But you talk to any students from Africa, and they'll tell you those boundary has historical colonialism, historically European influences that have arbitrarily set borders as nations. This has led to conflicts. Okay, and so, but we use the definition of nation here in discussion throughout the course because it's more convenience and more concrete and so forth. But having said that, that definition is more complex. Okay, for example, you're going to hear more about North Korea and South Korea. That boundary has been set by external forces after Korean, before World War II, it was colonized by Japan, and after defeat of Japan, the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans decided this is what they're going to do. We saw that with Eastern Europe, when you had countries that was divided, East and West Germany. You see this. So the notion of nation is one we use conveniently. But sometimes it's arbitrarily set. You could have two nations that share the same language and culture. You can have one nation that is in dispute with each other within different ethnic groups and so on. But for sake of just understanding things easier, and we have to set parameters at some point, we do it in terms of nation. So if you look at the definition of this, it's really the interdependence between nations. The more we do it, the more globalized that we have become. And we have, and of course, it's, if you look at the slide, it says, refers to elimination barriers or international movement of goods and so on. It's basically the interdependence, integrations, and the easier flow of goods and people and services between nations. And I don't have to tell you how much globalized we have become because we're living it, right? Whether we buy foods, vegetables from Chile, Mexico, whether we buy products that are made in China or clothes from Bangladesh and so forth. As consumers, you see these products being made globally. And of course, many of you go online and click, and you can get items from all over the world. Okay, so everyone is now living in the age of globalization, where we have become much more integrated, interdependent as ever before. Okay, of course, a downside of this is also a coronavirus. The more the flow of goods and services and people between nations, the more flow of disease. If some bad events happen somewhere else, it could be transmitted to other countries and so forth. The second important definition here is international business. And simply put, the textbook defines international business as involves all commercial transaction, including sales, which is most obvious to us as consumer when we buy products. But it could also be investments and transportations, whether it's airline transportation. For sales of goods and services, investments. It has international business. You don't just have to be a business student to realize the impact. Okay, of how it impacts us. You know, if you look, I mean, good luck, unless you have wealthy parents who will support you, unless you have a job that pays extraordinary amount of money. If you try to buy a house in Toronto, Vancouver, or even now in Windsor, Windsor House, as you know, Windsor House price has been just going over the tops. I'm not sure if I can afford a decent house in Windsor now, even with, you know, with the salary that I receive. I was fortunate enough to buy a house before, you know, everything went up. But this has to do to some degree with speculations and investments coming from abroad. Um, you know, there are a lot of wealthy people around the world, and they live in countries where the property values are very expensive in comparison to Canada. So if you're living in Hong Kong and you look at Canada and Vancouver and Toronto, they say, "Oh my God, it's so cheap." And Canada is extremely desirable country. You know, I would imagine if we opened up most of the borders, if we opened up all the borders, many people, if not most of the people, would want to come to Canada. Okay, whether it's because of clean air, values, or vastness of our resources or environment, or just to have Canada just having a incredibly wonderful reputation and image across the world, they might say this, you know, this is a good country to invest. So a lot of the condos and houses are bought as an investment from people who are not Canadians. But of course, it impacts Canadians because we need houses to live. And I mean, I cannot move to Toronto even if I want to because I can't, you know, I can't afford a house, a decent house. Even now, condo is probably, unless you're gonna live in a you know, 500 square feet or some studio apartment. It's just uh, beyond my reach, right? In fact, many people are leaving Toronto. People are retiring to Windsor because the housing has become relatively much cheaper than Toronto. But then again, that results in higher prices. So the real estate has been a real boom in Canada. And I think, and I would argue in large part to outside money, international commerce, as you see here, investment. Okay. And again, we are discussing in terms of people from different countries, different nations. Okay. So if that is the case, uh, just want to get right to the highlight points. So what are the forces that are driving this globalization? What are the forces that are driving? Again, this is kind of water is wet statement to you because you're living it. You're living it through. You don't have to be a business student, nor less international business student to understand this is what's going on. But let's look at specific things that are driving globalization. And number one, way up in the top of all of this is increase in application of technology. Okay, and wow, I mean the technology has really made this globalization and extension of the interdependence integration possible. Uh, Even now, right? I'm communicating through you through technology. You know, I have my microphone, my computer, and all the, and of course, the internet infrastructures, internet, and and the how fast the internet has permitted us to have virtual classroom. Now, obviously, there is a cost involved because this class is being taught uh, where lectures are recorded and so forth. So there's a benefit in terms of flexibility, convenience, but also there are some students who would like to have more lively discussion, and I missed that part as well. But increase in application of technology. Yeah, and it started from transportation, vast improvements in transportation, airplanes. I mean the commercial jets, and how quickly they can transfer goods and people. Even ships. I know the ship's been around for ages, of course, but recent was an evergreen transportation ship that was stuck. Uh, and, the incredible technology required to build that kind of huge ships that carry just innumerable items. The capability to navigate and carry so much items that move the goods. And the airplanes, whether you order something from Europe or Asia, it comes in a couple of days, or along with that movement of people. Okay, one of the reasons why cruise lines have done well in the past before this coronavirus hit was their ability to bring people from all over United States and Canada and the rest of the world, bring in through airplane, and then be able to put them on a cruise ships. Not only be able to bring these people in, but bring them the airplane transportation cheaply bring them. Of course, the airplane tickets are likely to rise as the demand rises as we go back to more normalcy. So it's transportation. Another component of application of technology is communication technology. Again, this class is being held virtually. Communication. Again, improvements in technology has permitted us, including the use of internet. I can't tell you. I mean, there are people that are doing commerce by traveling Southeast Asia. They don't have no permanent, permanent place where they stay, because through internet and technology, they can sell their services and goods and so forth. So we are living in an extraordinary time. I mean, I have been really wedded to my Alexa, the Amazon device. It's extraordinary. You tell Alexa to play a music. You ask Alexa to how to spell something, how to define something, what the temperature is to set the alarm, and so on and so forth. And not only that, you can communicate with somebody in another country, in the US and so forth. So, I mean, look at your smartphone, right? You have access to, just by smartphone, you have access to really to the broader world community. Okay, so the vast improvements in transportation and communication technology, especially the impact of internet, has significantly increased the effectiveness and efficiencies of international business. And it isn't just about international business. Your ability to share information with one another as consumers, to say which convey to your friends which item it's a good item to choose, or which you can rate these when you purchase something from Amazon and so forth. The vastness of communication has given reliability and confidence on the products that you buy from suppliers and sellers that you're not familiar with. Every time I go on Amazon to buy something, I'm buying something from a supplier. If it's not Amazon themselves, which I know that that's not a problem. They also host a lot of third-party sellers. Somebody I have never dealt with, but I'm relying on, first of all, Amazon, but also the ratings by other people who've used those products and have rated those products and put some comments. Of course, there's a caution involved because there's some manipulation in some of those ratings. You have to be careful about it. You can't just take it at its face value. But the whole point is that increase in application of technology like communication has built more trust, more confidence, more accessibility to move goods and services across national borders. And that leads us to the second part, which is the liberalization of cross-border trades and resource movement. Over time, governments, with the pressure from the people that they govern, have lowered trade barriers, have lowered restrictions, okay? Because they realize that there's tremendous benefit to international commerce. There's a benefit for Canadians to buy fruits and vegetables from South American countries and Mexico, Central American countries, where when we have the cold weather, they can provide us with lots of fruits and vegetables, and vice versa. During the summertime, when we produce our agricultural products, we can sell those abroad as well. So there clearly no sane government will lower trade barriers and lower restriction unless they're benefiting from it and their own people are benefiting from it. Okay, so this liberalization, cross-border trade, and resource movements are really done for a selfish reason, and every country does look out for its own people and its own economies. And of course, the citizens of these nations want greater consumer choice, right? The more consumer choice you have as a consumer, the better you are off. You want lower prices, okay? And international companies also bring competition to your domestic producers. And they challenge your domestic producers to be more efficient and to be more efficient and more effective in providing goods and services. So, even if you are not buying products from other countries, you may benefit from international business and competition because it puts pressure on your own domestic companies to do better, to offer wider choice of goods, more reliable quality products, okay, more choices at a lower price, and so on. So international business puts pressure on your own domestic domestic producers to do better. Okay, so second point that have led to increase in globalization is liberalization's cross-border trade and resource movement because we benefit from that. Number 3 is development of services that support international businesses. You must have these services in order that support international business to make it work. And these services are being provided by governments. It could be in terms of dispute resolution. If business to business have getting difficulties when you're dealing with foreign customers, foreign producers, that there's a dispute mechanism with the help of your government or your business commerce in order to sort that out. You have to have infrastructures for currency movements to be able to exchange money and to be able to exchange money between foreign consumers, producers, business, commerce. All these infrastructures, whether currency, transportation, or any other facilities that reduces the risk of doing business internationally, obviously promotes globalization. Now, if there's tremendous risk of doing business with somebody in another country, you're not likely to do it. But because of mutual benefit, particularly the governments and the banks have really worked to try to minimize those risks. The risk associated with dealing with people that you don't know, risk of dealing with people that speak different language, that have different cultural backgrounds. And a culture is very broad and very complex thing to look at. In Western countries, contract is a contract. In other countries, contract is not a contract. Contract is also negotiable, even if you signed it. Contract is a moving target. And as the situation changes, you can change that. But here, contract is a contract is a contract, right? With lawyers, potential lawsuits and so forth if you don't abide by the contract, even if the situation has changed. Okay, so it's, we'll talk about this probably later on, but development of services that support international commerce. Without those, it's difficult to conduct international trade and commerce. The fourth one is growth of consumer pressures. And I've alluded to this earlier. Because of innovations in transportations and communication technology, first of all, information travels. Information travels very easy. Consumers are well informed about and are able to assess any products, including foreign products. Okay, whether through posting of their experiences with that particular seller or particular product, or through social media, whether through Facebook, you share information. You share all kinds of stuff through Facebook, right? For professionals, LinkedIn, and so forth, and vloggers. I mean, if you go on YouTube, there's so many product reviewers and what they felt. Now, some of them are sponsors, so you have to be careful that they are truly neutral. But because of information and sharing of information travels so easily, the competitors around the world have been forced to respond to consumers' demand for increasingly higher quality and also cheaper products, or at least cost competitive products. Okay, so a lot of the I mean, if we stopped buying stuff from China, Mexico, or Chile, and so forth, probably our shelves would be empty, and we would only have to rely on Canadian seller. That will limit our choices, limit in terms of breadth of different items, in terms of quality, in terms of cost, and so forth. Fifth one is increased global competition. Okay, simply put, as I said before, when the competitors enter your market, you are almost obligated to enter their market. If a foreign competitor comes into your market and wages war, you're obligated to enter their market and wage war in their backyard. Okay? Otherwise, you're going to be in a very difficult situation. Okay, so a pressure of increased foreign competition will often persuade domestic firms to expand internationally. If minimally, to be able to keep your competitors in check in their own domestic market, but also a strong desire to access foreign opportunities in foreign markets and ultimately improve their bottom line, isn't it? Okay. The sixth force that is driving globalization is changing political situation and government policy. And by my goodness, this has played a lot of role, and this continues to play a significant role. Okay. Historically, transformation of political and economic policies, and really political and economic transformation that has occurred in Eastern Europe, Vietnam, and particularly in China has been extraordinary. That has led to globalization. Don't forget, China has 1.4 billion people. And it's just a matter of time before they will become the largest economy in the world. And there has been tremendous concern with the rise of China by the United States, because right now the U.S. is the top dog, right? They are the largest economy. They are the militarily the mightiest nation. But that's beginning to be challenged. Okay, but so when China opened up, I'm talking about opened up in terms of economically. There's many things that are very still closed. Um, and China joined WTO and started trading and doing business with other countries. It's really had a tremendous impact. And just look at all the products that you buy that are made in China. Look at the real estate prices that has gone up. A lot of foreign money's coming in, whether it's from China, from Middle East, and people who have a lot of money. And a lot of people have a lot of money. They don't want to just park it somewhere. They want that money to circulate and make more money for them. That has really impacted our country as well. Okay, expanding and just looking at changing political situation and government policy, which I have more things to say. That continues to be a challenge. There is, and the name of Trump will be around for a very long time. It's not a dated term anymore, and you know, although Trump sort of highlights some of these differences and start to weaponize the trade and international commerce instead of decoupling it, he's really integrated. But it's not just U.S. China has done that for a long time as well, and as well as many other countries. Okay, but we have a concern here because we have a political situation, and this is number 6, changing political situation, where we had Trump administration, where to make America great again, we have a Biden administration and so on to do this. And he's kept many of the stuff that Trump started as well. And China has really weaponized their trade as well. If you Google trade dispute between Australia and China, that is a marker for what is to come. This is nothing new for people in Asia, where there have been integration of political situations and government policies and how that has directly impacted international commerce. It's nothing new for us. But as China rises, just like any other country, they're going to want to exert their influence, make their marks on the world. But the difficulty is that you have a very different political system, right? China, despite its openness, is still a communist, very centralized government in terms of communism, and you have more democratic process. So there's also competing for value as well, and competition for value and conflict as well. What's happening in Russia and what has and will happen in Russia as well have an impact with so. And we'll talk about this more. I just alluded to the friction between China and Australia. Let me just, since that has come out, let me just say something about that. And the more recent issue has been the coronavirus in Australia, when they called for investigation to see how this coronavirus all started. China responded by not importing or restricting importing of some of the Australian goods. As you know, Australia, like Canada, is a commodity-driven economy. The vastness of land in Australia, the vastness of land in Canada holds enormous wealth, whether it's lumber, whether it's steel, whether it's sugar, whether it's lobsters, sugar. There's a lot of similarity between, I guess, the Australian economy and Canadian economy, because we have tremendous natural resources. But once instead of keeping politics and commerce separate and decoupling it, there has been more of utilizing trade as a trade, weaponizing trade to punish countries for what things that they say and do that are not agreeable to them. So China, Australia's largest country to which they export is China. China buys nearly a third of Australia's export. That's enormous. And they buy all kinds of stuff. They buy coal, they buy barley, sugar, timber, lobsters, wine, you name it. Okay. China is a rising power. China needs to build its infrastructures and housing for its billion-plus people. They need a lot of material resources. And the proximity to a resource-rich country like Australia makes for this arrangement. Okay, so there has been a tremendous trade tension between Australia and China. And this political situation and government policies have really impacted how they trade is that basically China says, if we can, we're not going to buy it from you. We're not buying it anymore. You're saying bad things about us. We're not doing any business with you. Okay, now they can't say that like I'm saying it, but they are saying that by making Australian goods that are coming into China impossible, whether through customs inspections. They can't do it outright, say, you know, we're not gonna do any business with you, because that would be a violation of agreements, including WTO, World Trade Organization, as a member state. But they can make it difficult for any product coming in by having regulatory policies that make it almost impossible hurdle for any commerce coming out of Australia. It's only going to get worse before it's get better, put it that way. Okay, but here is a classic example where you weaponize trade and international commerce, and has a tremendous impact on businesses. So if you're a wine producer in Australia and 80% of your wine, let's say, goes to China, and then all of a sudden China refuses it, the impact on that is enormous. Number 7, expanded cross-national cooperations. Now, you know, first of all, we operate on the assumptions no country will be involved in cross-national cooperation unless there's a mutual benefit. No sane nation, no sane people will get into an agreement where it doesn't benefit them and also benefit the partner. If you got a relationship where only you're benefiting and your partner's not, that's not a sustainable relationship, or vice versa. Your partner's benefiting but you're not, that's not a sustainable. So the expansion of cross-national cooperation really relies on mutual benefit. So governments have increasingly entered into cross-national treaties and agreements, whether it's a free trade agreement between Canada and Korea, whether it is a NAFTA, it's no longer called NAFTA, what's it called now? USA, Mexico, Canada agreement. I mean, it was a lot easier when it was called NAFTA, but I guess we just call it post-NAFTA agreement, where US and Canada and Mexico benefits from each other's trade. Less barriers or more free flow of goods and services. We have a large number of Canadians in Windsor that work in Detroit. Even with this coronavirus, you can still go as an essential services to work in the US, and so forth. Okay, so these are some of the things, but I think we touched on most of the things that really is driving this nature of globalization. Okay, and to some degree we've only talked about the benefits of it, but of course, just like anything else, there's cost involved as well. and we can't ignore these costs. When it is generally your life rules with most things. I can't say for all things, but as most things, when there's a benefit, there's a cost. And that's why we have cost-benefit analysis, right? So while this course and while this textbook and anybody else that is involved in international commerce highlight front center and promote international commerce and all the benefits associated with it, there's also downside as well. And of course, a lot fewer downside, otherwise we won't have international commerce, right? So some of the cost of globalization here is threat to national sovereignty, loss of freedom to act locally. Okay, and what we're really talking about here is, and usually many times it is concern of countries that are developing countries, less developed, have fewer people, fewer economic means, and so forth. But many citizens fear that countries' participation in multilateral agreements will diminish their sovereignty and freedom from external control, and to make their own decision in terms of what is good and bad for their own country. And we've seen that with Brexit, when Britain elected to leave European Union, largely had to do with their sovereignty issues and loss of their sovereignty issues. One of the factors in Britain to leave EU as a Brexit was the fact that they had little or no control over their borders. So refugees that are coming from other parts of the world went straight to Britain, because Britain is an economic powerhouse. A lot of opportunity there. And aside from moralities and aside on compassionate grounds, Britain did not have a say in who came to their country as part of EU. So if the refugee entered into any of the EU countries, they would have a free, clear way right into UK. So that was one of the issues that they were not happy about. Loss of national sovereignty in terms of loss of border. I mean, how much loss of sovereignty do you want if you can't control your own borders? Okay. Another issue is that people in smaller countries, or people in countries that are politically weak, or their government is subject to corruptions, or they just have limited resource to be able to defend their sovereignty. If you have a multinational corporation, a huge company that comes into your country, it could impact your political process, your election, because they have so much money and they have so much political influence. They may employ thousands of employees, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. Okay, there is a South African company, UK company, that hundreds of diamond miners. Okay, people mine diamonds. I think we'll do the case on that later on. But people all over the world have concern with globalization, that it will lead to external countries and external companies having an undue influence over their own sovereignty or own national interests. And then there are simply people who are anti-globalization. They are worried with harmonization of products and also elimination of traditional way of life, including language and social structure. Because of the power of the internet and commerce, by default, English has become, and by English has become a language to contend with, especially if you are doing stuff on the internet. And now English has become sometimes, second official languages. English is not a if you talk to any linguist, they'll tell you English is not a particularly good language to learn. Even the native speakers will tell you that. But because of this, and along with English requirements, the cultural impact that comes along with it. Okay. Now there's economic growth and environmental stress. Clearly, economic growth, whether it's in India, China, or in Mexico, have had both positive and negative consequences. One of the big things that is having the cost of this globalization and people wanting everything and anything from everywhere is impact on environment. I mean, the climate change. If your family has 2, 3, I know some family has 4 cars in Canada. Well, people in other parts of the world also want to have that car, 2 cars. They all want to have TVs. They all want to have refrigerators. They all want to live in an air-conditioned, nice house. They want all the things, not all the nice things that we have in Canada for granted. Well, everybody else wants it too, because that's the good life. Okay, that represents wealth and convenience and comfort. But what if 1.4 billion people want that? What if India, China, every one of the Indians and Chinese want refrigerators and 2 cars and so on? The enormous environmental stress that would cause. And they're no different from us. The enormous climate change, enormous environmental stress that's going to have in terms, and we are not to say, we can't say to them, well, you can't have a car while we have 2 or 3, 4 cars. Okay. So it's causing this economic growth as well as wealth associated with it, also causing all kinds of consequences. And the most right now that at the forefront is the climate change. All those cars being driven on petrol, all those plastics that we use and package, okay, all those electricity that we consume and so forth to keep our houses warm, all those washer and dryers that are being used. Okay, so the globalization has really made it easy for people to compare themselves to people in other nations, to share information, and some is keeping up with the Joneses have gone global, right? If your neighbor has something, or your friend has something, your family member has something, you want it too. If they bought a Mercedes, you want a Mercedes. And globalization has really brought that close to people around the world to see each other, what they're doing. And also, globalization has led to growing income inequality and personal stress. Okay. Income inequality is easily seen. I mean, there are people that are making more and more money, become more and more wealthier. When I was visiting overseas, one of my wife's friend bought us lunch at a fancy restaurant. And in the course of conversation, and I know her company recently went IPO. It's probably not a good time to go IPO, but the point is that she owned a large company. She had $70 million US dollar that she needed. She was looking to park somewhere to grow it. There's a lot of money floating around, and there's a lot of people that are poor, okay, that have not benefited from the income growth that have achieved by some people. Okay, and personal stress as well. With the global competition, talk about personal stress. Okay, globalization in education. Education now is rarely, Canadian education now is rarely available to anybody around the world. American schools that are very elite, Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, and so on. And then non-Ivy Leagues, but Stanford, MIT, they're not part of Ivy League, but they're still top dogs in education. They draw the best and the brightest around the world. Okay. It's not so easy anymore if you want to be a professor, because people from all over the world may be applying to get a PhD from United States. When I got my PhD, it's relatively straightforward. My competitors were domestic. Now you have people from India, China, Middle East, all over the world applying to the best schools. So anybody that want to advance their education and career have now, in number of fields, have to contend with global competition. People brightest and the best coming from all over the world. And this has really led to personal stress. So globalization has led to greater competition as well. Now, there is a part in the textbook where they talk about offshoring. I think it's important to know the terminology of offshoring and the implications of point and counterpoint, an implication of offshoring. Offshoring is the process of shifting domestic production to a foreign country for the purposes of serving the home market at the reduced cost. So offshoring is simply a word, is you're relocating your production somewhere else to keep your costs down or to lower your costs. There was, when NAFTA a long time ago passed, a lot of the American companies and some Canadian company went to Mexico and said, well, we want to operate out of Mexico. Okay, because the laborers are cheap. We don't have to pay them, what, $20, $15, $20, $25 an hour. We can pay them a lot less than that. Not only are we paying them less, but they're also even working harder because they need the job. In Canada, if you don't work, the government will take care of you. In other countries, you don't work, you don't eat. Very simple as that. Okay, so this notion of offshoring that a lot of company does to reduce and human cost, the human resource costs typically represent most of the cost for many companies. You go to Mexico under NAFTA and still be able to transport those goods up here and produce it a lot cheaper. They don't have to deal with unions. They don't have to deal with benefits. They don't have to deal with environmental laws. They're not as stringent or enforced. They don't have to deal with employment laws and so forth. They just lower their cost. Okay, and this has really led to problems as well, and personal stress as well. If you work in the assembly line, and the company says, well, we're going to go somewhere else because labor is cheaper, and we don't have to deal with unions and employment laws, then you lose the job. Okay, and we've certainly seen that as well. Okay, so have a look at that. Okay, I just gotten ahead of myself. So, and then why companies engage in international business? We've already touched on some of those things, but more specifically, number one, expanding sales. Surprise, surprise, right? Many of you own stocks. Many of your shareholders. When you buy your stock today, with an understanding that sometime in the future, when you want to sell it, that it will be higher. In order for stock prices to go up, sustainable stock prices that are up, the company has to continue to perform better, continue to sell more, continue to make more money. When I was overseas and talking to one of the executives, presidents of one of the companies, this is like riding a bicycle when you run a company. You can't stand still. You can't go backwards. You got to keep pedaling hard, moving forward. You got to keep growing. You got to keep making more money. This is what the shareholders want. Otherwise, they're not going to invest in you. So companies are constantly under pressure to produce and make more, expand sales, increase their revenue and their profit. And so they're constantly looking for a new customer base. They're constantly looking for new markets, new territory to expand into. Okay, because it means more money. It means good for the bottom line. This is certainly demonstrated by movie industries. Okay, the last year Parasite. It's a movie from South Korea. You know, they've done much better than had they done just focused domestically. Their storyline, their theme, the movie itself cuts across borders, cuts across national boundaries and culture. Everybody understands the inequality between the wealthy and the poor. Okay, it highlights that. It highlights the tension. And so movie industries now, whether it's Bollywood or whether it's entertainment companies from South Korea, are making movies that will have a broad appeal. Hollywood is really focusing on action-oriented movies where there's little dialogue. If you watch some of the older Jackie Chan movies, he hardly talks, but it's all action martial arts, which appeals. The less dialogues you have, the more easier for foreign consumers to understand. So many of the products and services that are being produced are now being produced for global sales, expanding sales. Number two reason why companies engage in international business is to acquire resources. Again, lowering of the costs. I mentioned about labor costs, workers. There are workers who only make $100 or $200 a month. That's enough for them to get by, and they're willing to work hard for that money. Okay, so it could be a human resources that they want to acquire. It could be a natural resources. Maybe you're a rubber producer and you want to be near rubber plants in Malaysia or in Indonesia or whatever, close to your material source. Okay, whether, for example, Hyundai has a research and design headquartered in California to design their cars. Okay, so engage in international commerce to have access to some of the skills and designers that other parts of the world offers. I'm not sure if still there or not. The chief designer was from BMW for Hyundai Motors, but I'm not sure. I'm not still there or not. And then the third reason why, third major, and there are many reasons why companies want to engage in international business, but the third major reason why, to diversify or reduce risk. Just like you as an investor, if you own stock, you have a portfolio, you want to reduce risk by spreading into different markets, right? Having present in the different markets. So companies seek foreign markets in order to minimize cyclical effects on sales and profits. But also, as I said earlier, it's a way to counter your foreign competitors' efforts to get in or compete with you by entering and competing in their own backyard. Okay, so reducing risk. Also, it's possible if your own domestic market is going down, it's not doing well, your profits from overseas may keep your company afloat and vice versa. There may be political upheavals in some countries, so you may want to spread your risk as well to other countries as well. But there are global companies, whether it's Apple, okay, or whether it's Samsung, whether it's Philips. The size of the company suggests that there's no way they could get that big just growing domestically. These are international companies, huge companies, where global is their marketplace. And they become oversized companies by being a global player. Okay, modes of operation. Here we're talking about companies engaging in international business through various operating modes or different ways that they have expanded internationally, or they've gone into international business. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because it's probably second nature to you. Merchandise exports and imports. Okay, goods that are being sent. When you buy a product, when you sell a product abroad, these are visible, tangible products that are sent to foreign country for use or resale, and then you import tangible products from another country. Okay, whether it's agricultural products, whether it's a manufactured products, whether it's a commodity, whether it's Canada sending its oil sands, the oil extracted from the sands in Alberta, selling those, or importing its importing its fruits from somewhere else, Florida or something like that. And then you have export, service exports and import. Service, we're talking about intangible, non-product related, non-merchandise, and specifically tourism is a big thing. When a Canadian flies to Paris on an Air France and stay in a French-owned hotel, right? You represent the airline, the hotel represents the service export earnings income for France, and service import payments for Canadians doing this, or vice versa. When you have tourism is great. Tourism is fantastic because people come to Canada, come to Niagara Falls, come to Windsor casinos. Americans come to Windsor casinos and they spend money staying here, eating here, gambling here. In case of Niagara Falls, using up all those services as well. And so they leave a great amount of money to add to our wealth. Service performance related to this as well, whether it's banking, where RBC has strong presence in the US, whether it's a Canadian insurance company like Manulife in Hong Kong. One of my students from Hong Kong ended up working for a Canadian company, or construction or engineering or what have you. Okay, so there's a lot of different examples of non-merchandise related, service sector related, whether it's licensing and franchising. We have what's called Disney tax. Anytime you use Mickey Mouse or any Disney Frozen, they're paying royalties to Disney to use that copyrighted product, or trademark or patents, copyrights. When you buy Hello Kitty, you are paying royalties to a Japanese company that owns the brand Hello Kitty, the trademark Hello Kitty. When you buy drugs, prescription drugs, when you watch movies, or when you download movies and you pay for it, hopefully you're paying for it, okay, you're paying for the copyrights. Now, with coronavirus, there has been talk to release the intellectual property on the drugs so that it is readily available to other people, can be manufactured by other drug companies and ultimately to lower the cost. Franchising, licensing agreement, franchising, for example, McDonald's. One nice thing about McDonald's is when I'm traveling abroad and when I get homesick, going to McDonald's and everything looks familiar, right? And so, well, franchising, whether it's KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, they're all over the world. Other ways to uh, other ways to enter company is investments, whether it's through direct investments. There, as you know, in the news, there has been a tremendous pressure on chip manufacturing. There's a shortage of chips that are used to build your just chips affects everything. I mean, you know, whether it's a processing chips, it's a memory chips, or what have you. It's needed everywhere, whether it's automobile manufacturing, phones, games, etc. There's a shortage of that. And the Americans have been pressuring companies like Samsung to build large production factories in their own countries to protect their industry that utilize chips. And so you may have, whether it's Toyota, Hyundai, or Taiwanese chip company spending billions of dollars building factories in the United States or in Canada. That's a direct investment. It could be a joint venture between a foreign company and a Canadian company. That's a direct investment to Canada. It could be a portfolio investment where you don't have a controlling interest, but you are participating in terms of letting them borrow your money, or you own equity stake in it. Okay. These are some of the things that I do want to highlight, and some of the major points. But just because I didn't cover does not mean that it's not important. These are the items that I did want to talk about. And so I'm going to stop here. Okay, but make sure you read the chapter and look at the PowerPoints carefully and so forth. Okay, this is chapter 1, really. So some of the basic stuff that you need to know, some of the basic terminology. Okay, and I will end the chapter 1 lecture here.